A private dinner, 220 guests, every seat handpicked, every invitation tied to one thing: the purchase of a single digital coin that no one fully understood, yet everyone wanted. What started as a celebration quickly became one of the most whispered about events in American politics. Because what looked like a fundraiser soon raised a much darker question: was power being sold, one token at a time? That question sent shockwaves through Washington, and when a senator tried to get straight answers during a hearing, the reaction that followed told viewers more than any document ever could. The moment began quietly. A routine budget hearing, rows of microphones, nameplates lined up like chess pieces.
Concerned about foreign influence on our government.
Senator, it is wildly offensive that you would accuse President Trump of not protecting American interest in our country when he is the president that has shut down our borders, unlike Joe Biden. President Trump has done everything to make America safe, and you asked me the question, and keep America safe.
Do you
and
know
you're trying to play a gotcha question at a budget hearing when you have murders left and right in your state, violent crimes, and we are doing everything we can to help your liberal state. Whether you're liberal or not, we're going to do everything we can to help the citizens of your state, and you're trying to avoid that because you're trying to play a gotcha question with the President of the United States, and it's not going to work. We're here to talk about our budget for public safety.
I do believe that as the leader of the Department of Justice, you should be concerned about foreign influence. There was obviously a lot of foreign influence and individuals who said they were there for that reason. And so will you appoint a special investigator to make sure that that foreign influence does not affect the policies of the United States of America?
I'm not going to tell you what I will or will not do, other than I will do everything to keep the people of your state safe, even though you don't want to talk about anything to do with your state because of the crime in your state. You also voted no on the Laken-Riley Act. We are doing everything we can to protect the citizens of this country. You also said that President Trump encouraged protest. It was the opposite. He's done everything he can to keep us safe, and he will continue to, as well as the Department of Justice.
It speaks volumes that you won't answer the question about transparency when the president is asking people to invest in his company and his products, and that foreigners are attending these events. I think transparency would be appropriate. Are you going to recommend any ethics guidelines to make sure that foreign influence does not find its way in through the doors of the White House?
How do you characterize foreigners, the illegal aliens that have flowed into our country? Is that who you're talking about? You don't want to talk about them. You don't want to talk about the crime that has gone rampant throughout this country and your state.
Well, you know, these hearings are a chance for us to ask questions, and I assure you I'm engaged in national security in many, many ways. But this also I am concerned about, and let me turn to a different piece of the puzzle, because the president also has another cryptocurrency called USD1. It is a stable coin. There was a request by UAE to produce AI chips that would go to UAE. The National Security Advisor of UAE is also the CEO of MGX. So after that request for those chips occurred, MGX then said, we will buy 2 billion with a B, of the president's coins. And then the president went to the Middle East and said, we will get you those AI chips. Does this sequence of events in which a foreign government asked for a big favor, and we had previously banned these chips to UAE because of the national security concerns. Then they buy $2 billion of the president's coins, and then the president goes to the Middle East and says, we will provide those chips. Does that sequence of events concern you about foreign influence on the United States of America?
The foreign influence on America that I would be concerned about if I were you was the Mexican national that resided in Oregon, who we just arrested, who had 384 pounds of methamphetamine. The foreign individual who I would be concerned about if I were a senator from Oregon is the Honduran drug trafficker who was residing in Portland for distributing fentanyl. The foreign national I would be concerned about if I was a Portland senator, an Oregon senator, is a Mexican national leader of a drug trafficking ring. Another one, fentanyl, firearms, fatal overdoses, all in your state.
You have made your point.
57,700
I will ask
fentanyl
for
pills
time to
and
respond after
stolen
this dialogue.
firearms in Oregon. That's what we should work together on, not gotcha questions during a budget
Let me
hearing on
recognize
public
Senator
safety.
Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Attorney General certainly has made the point that she's very concerned about issues that I'm concerned about as well regarding the security of this country. But let the record note that in terms of foreign influence and the sale of foreign influence through the president's coins, she absolutely refuses to respond and instead turns to a whole list of different topics. I think it's important for the leader of the Justice Department of the United States to be very concerned about foreign influence, and I encourage you to take on that topic and not consider it an offense that those of us who are concerned here, Democrats and Republicans, want Americans to make American decisions, not foreign influence being bought through crypto coins.
Senator Murkowski.
Chairman.
But within minutes, it spiraled into something entirely different. A senator asked a single, measured question about that dinner. Who was really in the room that night? Were all the attendees American citizens, or were some of them representatives of foreign interests trying to buy influence through cryptocurrency? It should have been simple. A yes or no. Instead, Attorney General Pam Bondi's expression hardened. The tone shifted, and what came next was not an answer, but a wall of deflection. She fired back, not about crypto, not about transparency, but about crime in the senator's state. Murders, violent offenses, statistics that had nothing to do with the question on the table. It wasn't just a dodge. It was a performance. You could almost feel the heat building in the room as Pam Bondi tried to turn the conversation away from the uncomfortable truth. The senator stayed calm, but the frustration was visible. The real question hung in the air like static. Why dodge so hard if there was nothing to hide? Because, as the senator explained, this wasn't about gossip or partisanship. It was about transparency. According to reports, one of the men at that dinner, Javersel Gas, a major player in the freight tech world, had openly admitted to purchasing millions of these coins. Not as an investment, but as leverage. He reportedly told associates he planned to buy $20 million worth because he wanted a policy change on freight between Mexico and the United States. If true, that's not a dinner. That's a transaction. The hearing room froze. Even through the monotone of government procedure, you could hear the tension. The senator pressed again. Would the Justice Department open an investigation to determine whether foreign or corporate money had influenced that event? Pam Bondi wouldn't answer. Instead, she repeated the same line about public safety and local crime, almost word for word, like a script she couldn't step away from. The refusal itself became the story. Every time the senator brought the focus back to the potential for foreign influence, Pam Bondi changed the subject. She blamed crime statistics, accused critics of playing gotcha, and claimed it was offensive to even suggest that the president could be involved in something improper. It was a masterclass in deflection, and that's exactly what made it so revealing. Because when someone refuses to answer a direct question, the silence starts to sound like confirmation. But the senator didn't stop there. He moved to the second part of the puzzle, a connection that, on paper, looked almost impossible to ignore. After the dinner, a foreign government requested U.S. approval for advanced AI chips, technology that had been previously restricted for national security reasons. Around the same time, a company led by that government's national security advisor, a firm called MGX, reportedly bought $2 billion worth of the same coins tied to that dinner. $2 billion. And shortly after that, the president visited the Middle East and publicly hinted that those AI chips might, after all, be supplied. The timeline was too clean, too precise. Request. Purchase. Policy shift. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. The senator laid it out calmly, asking whether this sequence of events concerned the Department of Justice. Once again, there was no direct answer. Pam Bondi pivoted back to local issues: drug trafficking, gang activity, crime rates, topics no one had even brought up. It was a deflection so transparent that the audience murmured, and that's when the atmosphere broke. The senator, clearly exasperated, restated his question. Are you, as the chief law enforcement officer of this nation, prepared to ensure that foreign influence does not seep into the highest levels of government through cryptocurrency? Pam Bondi responded with a lecture about fentanyl seizures and arrests in Oregon. It was surreal. Viewers watching live could barely follow the mental gymnastics. One question about ethics turned into 5 minutes of unrelated statistics that be why then. The story had outgrown the hearing. Social media exploded with clips, comparisons, and side-by-side edits of the question and the non-answer. Commentators began speculating that the refusal itself had become the headline, not what was said, but what wasn't. Reports started surfacing about the same dinner: luxury menus, strict guest lists, NDAs, and no public record of who funded the event space. Everything about it seemed engineered for secrecy. For some observers, this wasn't surprising. Political fundraising has always walked a fine line. But the introduction of cryptocurrency changed the game entirely. Unlike traditional donations, coins can move across borders with almost no trace. Ownership can be hidden behind digital wallets, and influence can be purchased with nothing more than a few anonymous transactions. In that sense, the senator's question wasn't just about one dinner. It was about the future of accountability in politics. Pam Bondi's continued refusal to engage made the situation worse. Every attempt to pivot looked more desperate than the last. She even accused the senator of ignoring crime in his own state, suggesting he was more interested in political theater than public safety. But the irony was hard to miss. The real theater was her performance. And the audience, both in the chamber and online, knew it. Then came the turning point. The senator stopped pressing and simply summarized everything for the record. He stated, calmly, that Pam Bondi had refused to address the potential sale of influence through the president's coin offerings. He noted that despite bipartisan concern, every direct question had been met with evasion. It wasn't a speech, it was a quiet mic drop. And it landed hard. The hearing ended, but the questions didn't. Analysts, journalists, and even blockchain experts began piecing together data trails, wallet movements, and exchange records trying to confirm who those 220 guests really were. The more they looked, the stranger it got. Some wallets were traced to overseas investors with prior government connections. Others appeared linked to shell companies registered in tax havens. None of this proved direct corruption, but the patterns raised serious concerns. And that's the point the senator was trying to make. Influence doesn't always arrive in envelopes or briefcases anymore. Sometimes it comes wrapped in blockchain code, traveling at the speed of light across invisible borders. That's why the refusal to even discuss it felt so alarming. Because when transparency disappears, so does trust. The larger issue is systemic. Cryptocurrency, for all its innovation, created a gray zone where politics, money, and technology collide. It offers plausible deniability to those who want to buy access without leaving fingerprints. The senator's questions were about drawing a line before that gray zone becomes the new normal. But what we saw instead was Pam Bondi choosing loyalty over clarity. And that silence spoke volumes. If you strip away the politics, what remains is a cautionary tale about power and perception. When leaders refuse to explain, people fill the silence with suspicion. When officials hide behind rhetoric instead of facts, conspiracy thrives. And when citizens stop demanding transparency, democracy begins to rot quietly from the inside. That's why hearings like this matter, even when they seem tedious. They're not just paperwork. They're pressure tests for accountability. This particular exchange also shows how quickly new technology outpaces old oversight. The law wasn't built for digital currencies that can move billions in seconds. Ethics committees weren't designed for wallets that can mask foreign identities. And yet, here we are, watching an entire political system struggle to keep up with innovation it barely understands. That gap between technology and governance is where influence thrives. There's a lesson here about behavior, too. When someone reacts with anger or deflection instead of calm answers, it's usually because they feel cornered. Pam Bondi could have easily said, "We're reviewing it," or "We'll provide the names later." Instead, she lashed out. That kind of reaction isn't just unprofessional, it's revealing. It shows fear. It shows there's something beneath the surface that's either embarrassing or dangerous to acknowledge. The senator's persistence is what kept the hearing grounded. Every time the conversation drifted into distractions, he brought it back to the same central theme: foreign influence. It wasn't about partisan points. It was about the principle that American policy should never be for sale. Even the most skeptical viewers could see that, and that's what made the moment viral. Not the shouting, not the politics, but the clarity. One person asked a straightforward question, and another refused to answer. That's it. And in today's media landscape, That simplicity cuts through the noise faster than any speech ever could. Afterward, discussions erupted about how the Justice Department could create new guidelines for political fundraising involving cryptocurrency. Legal analysts debated whether coins tied to personal branding should even exist when the person in question holds public office. These weren't fringe conversations. They were mainstream, broadcast across major networks. Suddenly, crypto influence wasn't just a niche concern, it was a headline topic. The irony is that this entire controversy could have been avoided with transparency. Publish the guest list. Disclose the donors. Show the transaction records. But secrecy fuels speculation, and speculation fuels outrage. The longer the silence, the louder the rumors grow. It's also worth noting that none of the senators' claims have been definitively proven. That's why framing matters. The reports remain unverified, the allegations unconfirmed. But the refusal to engage gives those rumors oxygen. In politics, perception can be as powerful as truth. The more someone hides, the guiltier they look. Even if the evidence is still being assembled, what's fascinating is how this moment mirrors so many others in political history. Power structures evolve, but the playbook rarely changes. Deflect, deny, delay, it's the oldest tactic in the book. But in the age of digital transparency, that strategy backfires. Every clipped response becomes a viral soundbite. Every dodge turns into a meme. The internet remembers what politicians try to bury, and maybe that's why this hearing matters more than it seems. It's not just about one dinner, one coin, or one official. It's about how quickly systems built for accountability can crumble when people in power decide that answering questions is optional. It's about how influence quietly buys access, one transaction at a time, until no one remembers who's actually running the show. When the senator made his final remarks, he said something that barely got quoted but might be the most important line of the day. Americans deserve American decisions. Simple, powerful, and impossible to disagree with. That's the entire argument distilled into 5 words. Decisions about national policy should come from voters, not investors, and definitely not from anonymous crypto wallets. By the time the cameras turned off, it was clear that nothing had been resolved. But something had changed. Viewers who might have tuned in casually left with questions. People who never cared about congressional hearings started Googling foreign influence crypto politics. That's the power of a single tense exchange. It pulls the curtain back just enough to make everyone wonder what else is hidden. Oh, what does this teach us? That transparency isn't just a buzzword, it's a shield. That accountability isn't optional, even when it's inconvenient. And that democracy doesn't fail in one dramatic moment. It fades slowly when people stop asking questions. The senator asked. Pam Bondi dodged. And now it's up to the public to decide which response mattered more. Because every time power goes unchecked, influence finds a way in. Whether through crypto, lobbying, or quiet dinners behind closed doors, the pattern never changes. What changes is whether people are paying attention. And after this hearing, it's safe to say they are. If you're tired of polished speeches and want to actually understand what's going on behind the cameras, stay with us. These hearings might sound procedural, but they reveal how power really moves in America. The names, the money, the silence, it all connects. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and stick around, because the next chapter in this story might just expose more than anyone expects. Like this video if you found this breakdown useful, and drop a comment with what you think Pam Bondi should answer next. The conversation matters, and your voice does too.